Hello everybody, this is Algebra 1, Semester 1, Chapter 3-7, Absolute Value Equations and Inequalities. So, recall that when we have an absolute value of something, let's say absolute value of 2, or absolute value of x, equals 2. This absolute value denotes the distance from 0. So when we solve for this, we'll solve by putting it in both directions. So the solution would be x equals 2 and x equals -2, because those are the two answers from the distance from 0. So when we graph something like this, we start at 0 and then we're going 2 units to the right, put a circle here, and then when we graph it on the other end, we'll go 2 units to the left. So absolute value deals with the distance from 0, but there's 2 different directions from 0, to the right and to the left. So when we solve for these, we're going to have 2 scenarios. One scenario where we deal with going in the right direction, and one scenario when we're doing going into the left direction. So you're going to have 2 sets of answers for 2 different directions. So keeping that in mind, when we solve an absolute value equation, so let's do one that the book has for us. So we have the absolute value of n, this has got it number 1, minus 5 equals -2. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And that's going to give me the absolute value of n equals 3. At this point, I know I'm going to have 2 answers, and I know it's going to be in both directions 3 units away from the center. So I know that for the right side, n is going to move to the right 3 times, n equals 3. And then when it goes to the left side on the number line, n is going to move to the left 3 times. So when I graph this, and put this in my graph, I know that I'm going to go 3 units one way, 3 units the other way. And it's going to be, in this case, 3 units from 0. So I'm going to go 3 units from 0 this way, 3 units from 0 that way. Right, I'm going 3 units to the right. I'm going 3 units to the left. And the center in this case is going to be 0. And the reason why the center is 0 is because n is all by itself right now. So since n is all by itself, that tells me that the center is 0. That's not always the case. The center will not always be 0 when we graph these things, and we'll have examples of that post haste. So this just reiterates what I just said. When you have an absolute, this is how the book does it. When you have absolute value of some number a and it's equal to b, you're going to have 2 directions. Now, first of all, b has to be greater than 0, because this denotes that it's positive distance. There's no such thing as negative distance. So this is all about distance when we do the absolute value, right? Distance is always, always, always non-negative or positive. Therefore, since this is positive b, I can say that a is equal to b on the right hand side, and I can say that a is equal to -b on the left hand side. Same thing we just said, just with letters. Alright, so this is a word problem, but I'll solve the number part. So 40. So we have the absolute value of 100 minus 20t, and it's equal to 40. This is a positive distance. This whole expression is in inside the parentheses, or the absolute value symbol. So and this is a positive distance. So we have two scenarios. Scenario number one is going to be 100 minus 20t is equal to positive 40. That's scenario number one. And we have, for scenario number two, 100 minus 20t equals negative 40 in the negative direction. So let's do each one individually. So on this side, I'm going to subtract 100 from both sides. That gives me negative 20 t equals negative 60. Then I divide negative 20 on both sides. Then I get t is equal to 3. On this side, again, I'm going to subtract 100. That gives me negative 20t equals negative 140. Then I divide both sides by negative 20. And I got t is equal to 7. T is equal to 7. Let's see. And that kind of makes sense. Let's see, the distance is going to be 100 divided by 2, so that's going to be 5. 2 to the left is 3, 2 to the right is 5. So those are correct. This 40, before you take out the absolute value symbols, has to be positive. Once you set that up, then you have two scenarios. When you're going to the left side on the number line, so our right side on the number line, so this is positive 40, and when you're going to the left side on the number line, then it's negative 40. Then you solve for those guys individually, and you get 3 and 7. If we were to graph this, starting at 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be at t equals 3 and t equals 7. The reason why I chose 5 is because I divided 100 divided by 20 here, and that gave me 5. So that was my indicator that was going to be my middle term. Another example of this that the book gives is, let's see, same scenario. So it's going to be 60 equals 80 minus 5t. So the 60 is positive, right? So since it's a positive distance, I can write both scenarios. So scenario number one, 60 is equal to 80 minus 5t. And scenario number two, negative 60 is equal to 80 minus 5t. So first scenario, I subtract 80. On both sides. That turns into negative 20. Divide both sides by negative 5. And I get that t is equal to 4. On this side, again, I'll subtract 80. and that's not negative 140. Equals negative 5t divided by negative 5. And I get 28. 5 goes into 14 two times. 2 times 5 is 10. With a remainder of 4, 4 drops. That seems about right. Okay. So that's 28. So you have 4 and 28. It's a big difference. Huge. Huge. Negative 20. Yeah. Definitely looks like that's right. And the center would be 16. So if I was to graph this, it's going to be a long one. And the center would be 16. Go by 2's. Twenty, oh, 18, 22, 24, 26, 30, 14, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4. So we have t equals 4 over here, and t equals, I don't know why I wrote 30. 28 over here. 16 in the center, so I go 12 to the right, and I minus 12 to the left, so that makes sense. Okay. What happens when your distance is not positive? So if we have another absolute value, so we have the absolute value of 3x minus 6 subtracted by 5 equals negative 7. I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And I have the absolute value of 3 minus x, 3x minus 6 rather, equals to negative 2. We have a negative sign here. Right? We have a negative sign. And that negative is there before we do anything to it. We still have the absolute value symbols. We haven't separated both scenarios. So this only works when before we do any separation and showing both scenarios, this number has to be negative, because this number doesn't talk about the direction. This number talks about distance. And distance can't be negative. Distance can't be negative. So since this distance is negative, there's no solution. No solution. Always, whenever you see a negative number, there's no solution before you do anything else. All right. Inequalities. We have two scenarios. If you have a scenario where your inequality is less than in the beginning, this is a and compound inequality. If you have a scenario where it's greater than here, then you have an OR compound inequality. So when I graph this, this is going to be n minus 1 is greater than 2, just like on the left-hand side. When you do the other side, it's going to be 2, but it's going to be negative 2, right? Because it's both scenarios. And then also the inequality stood, yeah, should stay the same. Okay. Here the point is pointing at n. Here the greater sign is pointing at n. When you do this, it's going to be n minus 2 is greater than 2, and then it's going to be or n minus 2 is less than negative 2. It's going to be in both. This going to inequality is going to flip with the or. N minus, yeah, I wrote n minus 2. Why did I do that? I don't know. Graphing these guys, this would be distance from 1. So if I was to graph this, there's 1, then I would go 2 to the right, so 1, 2. And since it's less than, right, it's going to go this way, and I would go 2 to the left, so that's 1, 2. Right here. This is an open circle, and then these guys would go together. On the other side here, this would be at 2, and I'm going 2 to the right, 1, 2. That would be 4. Open circle and go that way. Then this would be 2 to the left. This would be 0, open circle, and then going that way. Okay. And then the book shows it pretty well for the concept. If it's less than, then it's going to be a compound inequality with the A. And if it's greater than, it's going to be a compound inequality with OR. So an example of this, they give us absolute value of 2x plus 4 greater than or equal to 5. So this is an OR situation. So when I do this, it's going to be 2 scenarios. Scenario number 1, 2x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 5, or it's going to be 2x plus 4 is less than or equal to negative 5. And those are 2 scenarios. Subtract 4 from both sides, and I get 2x is greater than or equal to 1. Divide by 2, and I get x is greater than or equal to 1/2. On this side, I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides. I get 2x is less than or equal to negative 9. Divide by 2. And I get x is less than or equal to negative 9 over 2. So when I graph this, this is going to be at 2. And it looks like I'm going to this graph is going to be a little bit funkier since we're dealing with fractions. And I'm going to go, let's see, And then let's call this 4 over 2. Makes my life a little easier. Alright, so I'm going to go, well, that's, oh, no wonder. It's negative 2. I'm going to talk about that actually in a second after I finish this. So negative 4 over 2. So that means I'm going to go to the right 5 halves. So negative 1, negative 1, and 2. So since this is 1 half, I know that negative 4 halves plus 5 halves is 1 half positive. Why am I doing it? My brain is not working. Negative 1, 0, 1. So 1 half is right here. It will be a closed circle and go to the right. Negative 4, 9 halves is negative 4.5. So negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. So if I'm adding 5 halves to go to 1 half, I'm going to subtract 5 halves, and that's going to give me negative 9 halves, which is 4.5. So it'll be a closed circle here and going that way. A little funky with fractions. Notice that I turned that negative 2 into negative 4 halves to sort of help me out to find out the distance or which way I'm going. How did I choose negative 2? Here's how I choose negative 2. So this is what I did. If you look at the initial problem, let's pretend that there is no 5 there. Let's just pretend there's a 0. So we have 2x plus 4. I'm just going to put equal sign, equals 0. Subtract 4 from both sides. And then divide by 2. Then x equals negative 2. So that's how I got the negative 2. I subtracted the 4 from a 0 and then divided by 2. And I got negative 2. And that works with any compound inequality. Okay. We are done. That is this section. I hope you have a great rest of your day.